one day on the national news, the presenter, the newscaster, appeared wearing a suit with a tie, and instead of his, our suit. And so we were there during that period when the physical changes were taking place, and also, I mean, private restaurants, they were the first sort of private enterprise allowed. And so I felt we were there at a very special time, and things were, where you could see with your eyes how things were changing.
When I was out in this village, in that period, they had rigged up a radiator for me, which is the only one in miles. I was living actually inside the headquarters of the commune, and I was actually sitting and typing my notes on the floor. So the temperature outside was, 0 or below Fahrenheit sometimes, and in those evenings, the cold would come up through the floor, and I actually got chilblains. And so they pretty much forced me to go back to Beijing over the Chinese New Year because none of the people from Beijing wanted to stay out in the village. And so I sat for the whole period in the Beijing hotel, and I had this is before they renovated it, and I had these enormous bathtubs with like lion's claws, and I just soaked my feet in it for the whole time. I think that's the time when I first met you. You had already moved into that compound. Were you able at that time to get any kind of informal interaction with Chinese people?
Well, the only interaction I had was with, and I don't really even know whether that was entirely informal, but there was a former Navy person who he was a friend of a Chinese friend of mine, of ours, and she had introduced him to us, and he was one of the rare people with a telephone, which maybe was suspect, I don't know. In any case, I telephoned, and he was quite willing to come and see me. I could not go and see him because he lived in a restricted area. And he gave me bits and pieces of information which were interesting. I don't know that it was unobtainable in any other way. But the things I enjoyed were his own personal experiences during the Cultural Revolution, when he said that you cannot trust anybody, but you've got to trust somebody. You are a human being. And with some people, it's your brother, it's your closest friend. With me, he said it was my wife. And his wife was a doctor of Chinese medicine, of herbal medicine. And she really kept the whole, family going while he was in prison during the Cultural Revolution. But other things about him were interesting because he had been in Nanjing University, and then had gone out to Hong Kong, and a classmate of his came to Hong Kong and said, now the government has changed, this was '49, and you've got to come back and help reconstruct China. So he did, and before he knew it, he was in the Army, he was in the Air Force, and it was the first time I sort of saw the Korean War from the Chinese side, because he said that he was in Shenyang, I think, air base near there, and they would send out their fighter pilots, and they would never know who or how many of them would be coming back, and that was the way he sort of passed the war. Then he got into the Navy, and he made use of his English and got along. But I appreciate those little tidbits that I got.
During that period of the 1980s, it was the aftermath or the recovery from the Cultural Revolution was such an important issue. And I can remember After I came back from my first day in China, there was a Chinese professor of American history who was at the University of Michigan, who we became very friendly with. And when I was there in 1983 with this crew from National Public Radio, they wanted to interview his family. So his wife and 2 daughters and some son-in-laws came over, and we talked about the Cultural Revolution, and they were scattered all over the place, and it was very difficult. Some of them ruined careers, and it was very moving to listen to them. And actually, after about 20, 30 minutes into this interview, which we were taping, everyone was just tears rolling down their eyes, down their faces, recalling what happened and how this had split apart their family and really destroyed things that were of value to them, and how they had never really been able to completely rebuild their lives. People's dreams were permanently lost. One of the things I would like to understand is whether that bitterness from that period is still a big issue in China, or whether time has sort of healed that. Betty, did you get to know Tom at that time, or did you meet him? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
When did you arrive? When did you first get there to China?
We were there 81 to 85. And Chuck was saying they left in 84. They were there before we were there. But, no, several things to be mentioned. Like the Jinhua Hotel, which was the first American joint venture in the field of hotel management and construction, everything. Actually, Clement Chun had a Holiday Inn franchise here in this country and had several here. And the Chinese had seen this, and he was Chinese-American, and so he was invited to come and do something there in Beijing in terms of a hotel, and that is the Jinhua. Naturally, this became a gathering place for all the foreigners, just not the Americans. You didn't see many Chinese there, unless you invited them. And every time I've gone back, I always invite a group of several Chinese women, and we always meet at the Jinhua for lunch. And I remember the first time that I did, this was after we had left in 85. And these were fairly wives of senior officials, but we had a personal relationship on our own. And they ordered, well, what did they order? They came around with the filet mignon, and you chose your piece of meat. And lo and behold, if they didn't all take it, which came as a great surprise to me, but they were showing that they knew that this was the thing to have.
Did they order it rare?
Medium, yes. But another thing about the Jinhua, which was not just the physical plant, but it was the idea of service. Service to the people whom you are serving throughout the hotel. And this was ingrained in them, and the Jinhua Hotel became a model or a training school for hotel management and service throughout the country. They would have conferences there in Beijing where senior hotel managers from these state-run, very often in the provinces, would come, and they would drill in them the idea of service to the individual. I compare this with my first trip to China, when I did not know that we would be coming to China some 3 months later. And I thought this would be the only chance, and so Arthur and I had signed on for a Pakistan International Airways trip, which we made twice a year to Beijing for 10 or 15 days. We put up and we were all foreigners except for one Pakistani who was going to buy linens for his granddaughter who was being married. However, we were put up in the Peking Hotel. This is pre-Jinhua days. And I think our first day out, when we came back to the hotel, our guide announced that dinner would be in this private dining room at, it was up 5:30 or 6 o'clock. Well, with that, this great cry went up, oh, no, much later. Like what? She said, 7 o'clock. Nothing was said. We all go up to our rooms and have something or other, and then go back down at 7 o'clock. the food had been sitting there since 5:30. That was service in those days. And you felt it wherever you went. I mean, the Friendship Store, any of you who have been to the Friendship Store, which was pretty exclusive just for the foreign community there.